Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is Left Bank Books welcomes veterinarian, broadcast journalist, motivational speaker, and Miss America 1990. All of those things in one person, Debbye Turner Bell, who will discuss her inspirational new book, Courageous Faith, a lifelong pursuit of faith over fear. Turner Bell tonight will be in conversation with Emmy-winning journalist and anchor at KSDK, Kelly Jackson. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Debbye and Kelly, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. We offer curbside pickup and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. We are very happy to have reopened our doors so you can actually come inside our store and find this book on our front table. And we are so proud to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. We hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a signed copy for you or for all of your friends at left-bank.com. Purchasing a signed copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating, and it allows us to present this incredible event to you tonight. So thank you for your support. I am Shane Mullen. I'm the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end of the event, towards the end of the hour. So if you type your questions as a comment, we will get to those at the end. And you can do that at any point in time throughout the event. And be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook and YouTube to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. Our fall is packed with fantastic events for readers of all ages. I am in the process of announcing some really, really incredible events that are certain to be very exciting for everyone involved. And now about tonight's book, Courageous Faith, a lifelong pursuit of faith over fear. When you feel like giving up, seek God and ask for courageous faith. Setbacks, failures, and fatigue impacts us all. And at times we don't feel like going on, but we must. In this book, you'll discover faith-filled principles to use as a blueprint for perseverance and a new definition of success for your life. About tonight's speakers. Dr. Debbye Turner Bell is a veterinarian, broadcast journalist, motivational speaker, workshop facilitator, corporate trainer, and Miss America 1990, the first for the state of Missouri, if I'm not mistaken. For more than 2 decades, she has addressed audiences in the corporate, academic, and community service arenas. In addition to her speaking and media work, she is also the founder and CEO of Debbye Turner Bell Consulting, a faculty member of the Institute for Management Studies, and an affiliate trainer for the Transporter Group, Inc. Dr. Turner Bell lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan, with her husband, Gerald, and daughter, Lindley. And tonight, Dr. Debbye Turner Bell will be in conversation with Kelly Jackson. Kelly is an Emmy Award-winning television journalist and has been in the business for 30 years. Kelly is a news anchor at the NBC affiliate, KSDK TV. She also co-hosts a morning talk radio show, McGraw Live, on KTRS, and is the executive producer and host of the YouTube series How My Pet Lives. Kelly has received numerous honors, including the St. Louis Business Journal's 40 Under 40. The former dog walking service she founded, My BFF Network, received St. Louis Magazine Editor's Choice for Best Pet Service in St. Louis in 2012. Kelly volunteers her time to various animal welfare organizations by hosting and emceeing fundraisers, including telethons for the Humane Society of Missouri. Kelly lives in her adopted home of St. Louis, Missouri. And now, without further ado, I am so happy and proud to welcome our guests for the evening, Dr. Debbye Turner Bell and Kelly Jackson for Left Bank Books. Hello.
Hi there. Hi, Shane. Hey, K-Lolo.
Hello, Desiree. My nickname for you.
I thought I'd just throw it out there right away.
I know. People are probably like, what? I guess it takes getting you to write a book that we can actually see each other in person.
I know. Isn't that sad?
Virtually.
Yes. Thank you, Shane, for having us. So appreciate it.
We have a really great audience already here, and I'm certain more are going to join over the course of the hour. So I'm going to toss this over to you.
All right. Thank you, Shane. Debbye Turner Bell, Dr. Debbye Turner Bell. First of all, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And I want to thank all the people who are watching right now. I know that you have a pretty big contingent of St. Louisans who are joining the conversation because you spent so many years in St. Louis as a journalist. And of course, I know you have a large group of Missourians throughout the state who are joining in on the conversation since, as Shane did note, you are the first Miss Missouri, the first and the only to have won the Miss America, the title of Miss America back in 1990, which was hard to believe that it was 32 years ago.
Yeah, I competed 32 years ago.
I can't believe that they let infants win.
I know.
And 3 years old.
I won when I was 3, right after I gave up the passing.
Well, you look fantastic, and I'm so glad that you're here. And I want to tell you something. This book, I texted you after I read it. I had one chapter left, and I told you this book is a masterpiece. I absolutely love it. And in fact, I can't wait to read it again because I love that you weaved your life story within these 10 principles of faith. And these are principles that we all could really use right now.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for the great compliments and the great words. I mean, literally, I just kind of opened my heart and just laid it all out there and tried to be as authentic and also vulnerable as possible, because I really do believe what comes from the heart touches the heart. And I just want people to know that you are not alone in this journey, that life can be awesome, but it can also be very difficult. Sometimes in those difficult times, we feel like we're the only one dealing with whatever the issue might be. And so I wanted to put as many of my issues as I thought people could stand out there, just to say, hey, listen, we all go through this. I survived it by the grace of God. You'll survive it by the grace of God. And it takes courageous faith to move past it.
And there is no topic that you did not tackle. And, even though we've known each other since I think when I started KSDK in 1998, there were things that I was learning and I was like, wow, that you put it out there, because I have learned that even though you are Miss America and you've achieved so much in life, you go through many of the same things that we all do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm human. I love a quote that Oprah used to say. She says, I'm just like everybody else, except more people know me. And I'm not trying to make myself equal to Oprah at all. And I don't know that I believe she's like everybody else, but I understand the point is, absolutely. I've dealt with setbacks and frustrations and insecurities and even depression. I talked about the bout of depression that I had right after my year as Miss America. I was an empty vessel at that point. I poured out and poured out and poured out, and I just had nothing left. And there were days that I didn't want to get out of bed or get off the couch, and I would just watch TV and eat all day long because I just couldn't, take it anymore. And so I talk about that because I know other people have experienced the same thing, and we can all live to tell the tale for sure.
So let's do a proverbial rewind of your life. I feel like this is your life. I want to set the stage. You were 7 years old, and you were at the kitchen table with, I'm assuming, and I think this is a very accurate statement, the most influential person in your life, your mother.
Yes, absolutely.
And what happened that day, I think, became the foundation of your life, and while we're here talking. However, as a little girl of 7, which I think is so cute, you initially thought that you were getting a prize because you were able to read a sentence. So Can you tell us what happened from there?
Yeah, so I write about this in the book, as you well know. When I entered the first grade, and back in those days, you didn't learn to read a full sentence really till the second grade. You learn the alphabet in the first, and then you start learning to put sentences together. And my mother would ask me, "Do you know how to read a full sentence?" And I was like, "No, not yet. I know this word, I know spot, I know run, whatever it was." And I didn't know why she wanted to know if I could read a full sentence, but I figured since she was so fixated on it, that I was going to get some great prize. And so in my 7-year-old head, that great prize was a pony. And I remember the day that I read my first sentence that had a full noun and verb and, maybe even an adverb in there. And I came running home from school. I lived 2 blocks from my elementary school, screaming the whole way, I can read, mommy, I can read. And I just knew there was going to be a pony tied up on the side of our house or something. And she would stand at our side door and look up the hill to watch me walk home. And she came in front of me, sat down at our kitchen table, which was right by that door. And I burst through the door and was like, I can read. She says, come sit down. And I remember being out of breath and I'm panting hard. And I'm like, what am I going to get? I didn't see a pony, but there's still going to be something good. And what I didn't notice was she had her Bible open in front of her. And she pointed at it and she says, this is yours. And she said, read it every day for the rest of your life. And I'm like, what? Where's the pony? And she went on to explain to me salvation, that God loved me and he had a plan for my soul in eternity through Jesus Christ, and explained to me that if I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior, that I would be saved, that I would spend eternity in heaven, but also I would have an advocate for me here on earth. And she asked me if I wanted to receive Jesus in my heart. And I was like, okay, sure. I was growing up going to church. That sounded cool. I just want to get past that to get to the pony. And she prayed a prayer of salvation with me. And then she pushed the Bible toward me and she said, this is yours. Read it every day for the rest of your life. And by that time, even at 7, I began to realize, okay, there's no pony coming. Mm-hmm. That this prize was salvation and to be able to read my Bible. And I didn't understand the significance at that time, mm-hmm. But I was happy to be saved, as we say, to have Jesus in my heart. And I started trying to read that Bible, which was hard to read for a 7-year-old. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. It created the foundation for which everything else in my life was built upon.
And you were, I'm kind of moving from your little Debbie to the woman that you are today. And you excelled in academics, you excelled in music. And when you get to that age, when you become a teenager and you still have that foundation, but you were also grappling with, hey, I also want to be a cool kid. Mm-hmm. And I remember in part of the book, you attended some kind of education conference, I believe. And you, at that point, said, not that you had strayed away by any means, but you felt the conflict between trying to be cool and a teen, yes, and still being a Christian and feeling confident enough to be able to let people know.
Yeah.
So something happened that during that conference too that made you kind of go back to your foundation.
Yes. Yeah. You're beating around the bush. I'll just jump right on out of it. Yeah. So I write about this, that I lived a strict separation of church and school. And even though I was growing up in a Christian home and we went to church every time the doors flew open, and we prayed daily as a family, we read the Bible frequently, and was again at church and Bible studies and youth groups and intercessory prayer meetings and all of that. And I was all
church.
And yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
Yes, child. But when I went to school, I wanted to be popular and I wanted to be accepted. And so I kind of, if you will, hid my light under a bushel because I didn't want to stick out. I didn't want to be labeled a holy roller or a Bible thumper. Those were the pejoratives for Christians back then. I just wanted to fit in like everybody else. And so the story you're referring to is there was a a youth pastor that came through Jonesboro, Arkansas, and conducted a youth revival. And they put up flyers all over the school and around town. And back in this days, you could advertise a church event at school. And the draw was, if you came and stayed to the end, there was free pizza. So I was going for two reasons, because going to church is part of what we did. And then I love pizza, and pizza never tastes so good as when it's free. And so I knew I was going.
Love pizza.
Oh, yeah. And I walked in the door, and one of my friends from school, who I saw every day, saw me walk in, and she kind of got a weird look on her face, and she said, "Debbie, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Come to hear the preacher like everybody else." And she said, "Are you a Christian?" And she was incredulous about it. And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a Christian." And so I start going down, what I thought was my Christian pedigree. And she just looked at me with suspicion. And as I described in the book, I remember finally understanding something my mother used to say all the time when I was growing up. She used to say, I can't hear what you're saying, because what you're doing is talking too loud.
Mm-hmm.
And, I used to roll my eyes at that. I was like, what does that even mean? And in that moment, I understood what it meant, because it didn't matter what I said to this girl that day. My life had already preached a sermon to her, and she had made her conclusions based on my behavior. And so that convicted me. That made me feel heartbroken, because I realized that in a real way, I was ashamed of God before men, to quote the scripture. And so, set through the sermon, I don't even remember the sermon or what he talked about. But at the very end, he did 2 altar calls, one for those who wanted to make a first-time commitment to Jesus. And that wasn't for me. I'd done that 8 years before when I was 7. But he made a second one. And that was truly the game changer for me. And the second call was for those who had accepted Jesus but hadn't been living up to that commitment, and maybe had fallen away, and if they wanted to recommit their lives to come forward. And I sat there, and I was in almost panic, because I'm in a church full of people who knew me from school that didn't know I was a Christian, that I was afraid for them to know I was a Christian. I didn't want to be rejected, even in that moment. But in that moment, for the first time, what God thought of me was more important than what people thought of me. And so I stood up and I went to the front. And by the time I got to the front, I'm, just crying. And I remember telling God, standing there at the altar at First Baptist Church, right there on Main Street in Jonesboro, never again will anybody ever get to know Debbie without also hearing about Jesus in Debbie. And it changed my life. It changed the way I lived my life to this very day.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay, I'm going to fast forward a little more.
Okay.
Determination, and you have a lot of it. I mean, you have to become a veterinarian, a Miss America, motivational speaker, all of which you have excelled in. And but you also talk about failure. So I'm kind of mixing these two chapters together, because you open with failure. And you entered the Miss Arkansas pageant 3 times and got so close, but didn't win.
Yeah.
Miss Arkansas.
Right.
But when you moved to Missouri, so first of all, that failure and thinking, everyone thought you were going to win. Everyone was convinced this last time you were going to win. How did you pick yourself up and say, okay, I'm going to move on. Am I going to do any more pageants? I don't know if this is really for me.
Yes. So first of all, I had quit a couple times before I even got to that point, thinking, this is not for me. I wasn't getting the results that I was hoping for. So by the time I went back to the Miss Arkansas pageant for a 13th time, which meant I had to win a local pageant, which took me back to Miss Arkansas. And it took, I think, 2 or 3 locals to get back for that 3rd time. I was the returning first runner-up. And as you said, I was the odds-on favorite to win, because at that time, there was this ongoing tradition that the returning first runner-up from the previous year, and for those who are uninitiated in pageants, first runner-up basically means second place, that she usually came back and won. And so I was that person. And so I got the big cheers when I walked out on stage. The press coverage covered me as the front runner. I thought I was ready. I'd been in the system for a while. I kind of knew the game. And I was convinced, this is it, God, this is it. I'm going to win. And they began to call out runners up, and they got to first runner up and called my name again. So now I'm first runner up 2 years in a row. And it was devastating. And I opened the book with this because what I sincerely believe is that great success is built on a foundation of failures. And failures, though, that are done well. And what I mean by that is when we do fail, when we do fall short of our mark, if we will pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off, learn from that experience, improve, and then try again, then we are marching toward ultimate success. And so it was on that night after the stage lights were off and after everyone had left the auditorium, I went back to my hotel room. I asked my family to stay in the lobby. I just wanted to go be by myself for a moment because even the audience was surprised. When they called my name as first runner-up, you could hear the audience go, oh! And so I kind of had to keep this pasted on smile for all the pictures and say congratulations to Patty Jo Thorne, who won, and she was a wonderful Miss Arkansas. By the time I got back to my hotel, I had this well of grief and sorrow and regret and anger. And I fell on the floor once I got inside the room and just cried harder than I'd ever cried at that point in my life. And I just remember saying, God, I don't understand. I don't understand why. Why did I do this again if this was going to happen again? And I literally cried until my body could not manufacture any more tears. And I just kind of laid there breathing. And I heard in my heart, and I do believe a great, awesome God who can create a whole universe can communicate with his creation. And so I heard in my heart, Debbie, I'm faithful. Now get up. And I had to lay there and make a decision. Was I going to wallow in my sorrows and allow that to lead to, bitterness and resentment and hardness? Or was I going to get up, face that failure, and figure out what to do next? And so I believe that voice in my spirit that God is faithful. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I didn't know if I was going to be in another pageant. I didn't know that I was ever going to be Miss America, but I did know that I serve an awesome and loving God and that he had a plan for my life. And while it didn't make sense in that moment, I chose to trust him. And so that's where the title of the book comes from, Courageous Faith. Courageous faith is about getting up from our lowest point when things don't make sense, when things are not fair, when we've done everything we know to do and everything we're supposed to do, and it still doesn't work out. I believe that all things work together for good for those who love the Lord. And so courageous faith is getting up on that promise, not knowing what the next step is going to be, not knowing what the outcome is going to be, but refusing to give up in that moment. And so it was in that moment, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew I wasn't going to stay on that floor. And I knew that that night was not the end of the story. There was more story to be told.
And it certainly wasn't. It certainly wasn't, because all those tears that you cried, you didn't even have tears when you won Miss America.
No, I didn't. I didn't cry that night. And I jokingly said, I cried all my tears to get here. Right. It was pure joy that night. Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember watching that night.
You can remember that far back?
No. Yes, I can. Because it is a little hard sometimes. But I remember you're playing the marimbas. And I said, oh my goodness, she's so good. And she's playing Fly the Bumblebee. Mm-hmm. And in my head, just from that, I said, this sister's going to win. But it was still a road to get there. I mean, you won Miss Missouri after the first try. And along the way, and I didn't write down any of the names, but you did have a lot of advisors and so much support from people. Mm-hmm. And then you had naysayers too. Mm-hmm. So, because you weren't a pageant person, you didn't start, young doing these pageants. So it was just such a amazing that you won, and we are all able to see it on television. But the thing that stood out to me when I was reading this was after the pageant. And I know you've talked to people and you've told me this story too, and it's in the book. And as much as you love pizza, you know, you didn't eat, really. You did not eat.
Yeah.
But you did after the pageant.
Oh, yes, ma'am, I did. Yeah. What Kelly's talking about was my body is not built to be as thin as was required in those days for the candidates, the contestants, as we called them back then. And so I just literally would have to stop eating like a week or two before the pageant to get down to that size that was considered acceptable. And this was back in the days where particularly supermodels, they were thin for the sake of being thin, no muscle tone, no, great skin and all of that. It was just really, really thin. And so the only way I could get that thin was just stop eating. So leading up to the finals of the Miss America pageant, I mean, I was literally eating like an apple a day, and I would carry a Snicker bar in my purse. And when I thought I was going to feel faint or going to pass out, I'd eat a bite of the Snicker bar to keep me from passing out. How stupid is that? And it's a wonder that I didn't develop an ongoing eating disorder for that. And I'm grateful for that. I know that many people suffer from that, and it's horrible. So anyway, when I won that night, I had two prevailing emotions. First of all, three. I was just out of my mind, happy and excited. Secondly, I was hungry. And thirdly, my feet hurt. So those were the three things I was thinking all at the same time. So I couldn't wait to have solid food. And that night, I had been upgraded to what they called a high roller suite, which were these big, opulent, lavish suites in the casinos in Atlantic City. And I got upgraded to one. And there was a jacuzzi in the living room. And there's marble everywhere. This huge bedroom with king size bed. And my dad reminded me of this a couple of days ago. There was a console at the foot of the bed, and there was a remote control. You hit a button, and the television rose out of the foot of the bed there. It was more opulence than I'd ever seen in my life. And so my traveling companion, the lady who would travel with me for that first leg after winning, we got in our swimsuits, filled up that jacuzzi, and ordered pizza, and sat in the jacuzzi eating pizza, and with my crown on. So that probably was the most fun that I had the whole year.
Okay, I have to ask you this. Looking back at that, and everything leading up to it, what would grown woman Debbye tell contestant Debbye, who is doing her final, I don't know, maybe the swimsuit competition, whatever the last thing was before, they had the final question for Miss America? What would you tell her, knowing what you know now?
Knowing what I know now, and this I would say to anyone at any age, but particularly young women, because young women these days, and really for generations, have been under pressure to conform to some mold and to live up to some impossible perfection that just is unattainable. I would say to that young Debbye, you're enough. You as God created you are enough. And I didn't know that then. Even as Miss America, I suffered with sometimes crippling insecurity. And I was afraid that if people really got to know me beyond the makeup and the crown and the cool clothes and, the cool cars, that they wouldn't like me. And it took years for me to be happy with how God created me, to accept my skin tone, to not want to be a lighter shade of brown, because, we know in our society, not only do we deal with racial inequities, but there's colorism then also mixed in there, that my hair with its kinky, fuzzy roots from Africa is beautiful and just fine by itself. And, that my big grandmama and them legs, as long as they can carry my body around, they're perfect. And I didn't have a sense of that back then. I was constantly seeking others' approval and trying to live up to other people's expectations of me. So that would be my message. You're enough. All by yourself. You're enough.
I could see how anyone under that microscope would have insecurities because you were always under the microscope. So
yeah. And some of those comments I remember, first of all, people can really be mean, not trying to be mean necessarily. Sometimes they are being malicious, but people would make comments, oh, you're not as thin as when you won, or oh, I thought you were taller, or oh, that's what you're wearing, whatever. And people would just make comments. And at that age and at that stage in my life, I internalized all of that. So I was thinking, okay, well, how can I make myself seem taller? Or, oh my goodness, I got to stop eating so I can be smaller, those kinds of things, thinking that those comments were telling truths about who I am and who I was supposed to be. And my message, particularly to young ladies today, is first of all, no one, and I mean no one, can live up to their own press. So we see these filtered, stylized, enhanced social media versions of people's lives, and it's unrealistic. Nobody can do it. Supermodels can't even look like they look on a magazine. By the time it goes through all the post-production and the retouching and and all of that, they can't even look like their own picture. But our young girls get caught up in self-defeating behavior because they feel like they have to attain something that truly is unattainable.
Totally unattainable. Okay, I need my reading glasses so I can look at my notes. You have on page 111 of the courage, and you say, and I love this, Debbie, courage is a decision, not a feeling. And you touched upon this earlier, and I was going to bring it up, but after Miss America, you were still doing a whirlwind life. You attained your veterinary degree, Dr. Debbye, and you were a motivational speaker. You ended up working for Purina. You were going nonstop. And at one point, I do want to touch upon this again because it's so important for people to know that it can happen to anyone, even someone of your stature. You said at one point, you didn't realize it at the time, but you were depressed. So can you touch upon that just a little bit again, just so people know that, and you sought counseling from a Christian counselor.
Absolutely.
How so important that is for people to be able to recognize that and to seek help from people of faith and
from the experts.
Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, we're coming into an age where I love that, people like Michael Phelps and Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, have talked about their own mental health struggles because it's bringing mental health out of the shadows. And I love that. And I want to see that happen more. And I share my own experiences with depression because I want people to know it is not a character flaw. It's not an indication of some inadequacy, that it is in many cases a disease just like diabetes, heart disease. I mean, we don't get ashamed to take high blood pressure medicine. We don't get ashamed to take insulin. We should not be ashamed if we need counseling, or even if we need to take some medication to help a chemical imbalance. And so I wanted to share that in my own experience, just to destigmatize it, that after that whirlwind year, and I traveled 20,000 air miles a month that year, I worked 7 days a week, 48 weeks out of that year. I was in and out of a city every 18 to 36 hours. So it was insane. I likened it to a presidential campaign. And I literally was giving speeches, shaking hands, and kissing babies and signing autographs. So, it was just a tough physical year, and it was tough emotionally. And on top of that, according to Myers-Briggs, and I believe it, I'm an introvert. I'm an introvert that's learned how to live an extrovert's life. But any introvert will tell you, once you run out of words, if you keep talking, it's depleting. And what I didn't know that about myself then. And so by the time I finished this year of talking and giving and entertaining and living up to other people's expectations, I was wrung out. And I continued, as you said, I continued to travel for the next 5 years after being Miss America. I continued to speak 200 speaking engagements a year. So I just kept going. And I finally just went right into a wall.
Yeah.
And got to a place where I was so emotionally and physically and spiritually tired that there were days that I couldn't face the day. And I would every once in a while cancel a speaking engagement because I couldn't do it. I couldn't get dressed. I couldn't smile. I couldn't live up to that image. And I'm thankful that I was raised by not only a God-fearing woman of God, but she was a counselor by trade. So I was raised by a woman who not only did counseling, but encouraged her two girls, my sister and I, to identify our feelings, to address them and to talk about them. And so I was not ashamed or afraid of seeking help. So I sought out a Christian counselor and went and got help. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that we're weak or inadequate. It means that we recognize we need help. So I'm so grateful that I did. And I've used Christian counseling on and off my entire adult life to even get me through the trauma of losing my mother so unexpectedly. She was 55 and we had no idea she was not going to survive that cancer diagnosis. So I needed help. The courageous faith is about admitting that you need help. It's not about ignoring that you have a problem. The real courage is about admitting that you need the help.
That is the courage.
Yeah.
We have a lot of questions. And I just want to remind everyone who is joining our conversation that we're going to switch to audience Q&A in just about 5 minutes. So if you have any questions, you can type the questions in the comment section. And I was going to touch upon the death of your mother, which was just heartbreaking. But I want to switch gears to your husband.
Yes.
And 15 long years. Now, we should be clear. I want to be clear. It wasn't that you guys were dating or anything for 15 years, but you knew him for 15 years. Mm-hmm. And I like how you say, what did you say? It took you a while to
come around. Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about the relationship that you guys first had and then how you guys ended up getting married?
Yeah, so we met in 1991, I believe it was. He was an event planner and I was a speaker. And so he booked me to come speak at a Christian youth rally in Columbus, Ohio, which is where he is from. And I don't remember that meeting at all. He remembers every detail of it. So had that event, and then I ended up going back to Columbus for a different event. He handled that one as well. And that's when I remember meeting him. And I remember him just being a nice guy. He wasn't trying to run game, or Mac on me, as they used to say. But he was just a nice guy. And so we would talk maybe once or twice a year. We agreed to stay in touch. But I was very old fashioned. I still am in many ways. And I believe that the man should be the pursuer. And so back in those days, for sure, I did not call guys. If they wanted to talk to me, they had to call me. And so he would call me once or twice a year and we'd have great conversations. And then I wouldn't hear from him again for a year. But he was just a nice guy. I didn't have any attraction to him. I didn't have any sense that he was my husband. He's just a nice guy. He was a brother in the Lord. And I liked him so much, I tried to set him up with my best friend. I was like, girl, he's marriage material. You ought to date him. And her first question was, well, why aren't you dating him? I'm like, he's like my brother. I can't date my brother. Come on now. And so I remained I kept him in that friend zone for 15 years. And I tell all the details in the book. I want to encourage everybody to get the book, read the details. Yeah. But for our purposes tonight, what ultimately I realize now looking back was I just wasn't in a place emotionally to to recognize him, let alone to be able to sustain a healthy relationship with him. You know, I was hard charging, hard driving. My career was what was my priority. I didn't know how to be in a nurturing relationship. You know, I knew how to argue and debate and get my way and bully. And I would have, had we started dating, you know, when I first met him, I would have chewed him up and spit him out. Because I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the emotional intelligence. And so it took 15 years for me to finally recognize some of my own childhood baggage issues. You know, I had daddy issues, abandonment issues, control issues. And it took that period of time for the Lord to reveal and work those things out of me. And once I got to a fairly redeemable state emotionally, that's when all of a sudden, you don't really look like my brother anymore. He looks kind of fine. And so 15 years in, we started to date and then got married a year later.
It's really a sweet story. He went from brother to brother.
To brother man.
Brother man. No, it's a really nice love story, and something I think that we all can relate to when we meet someone who is just a good person, you know, and you end up developing feelings for them. We are going to go to our question segment and there's Shane. I had one more question.
Hey, Shane.
Okay. Go for it. Yeah, we do have a lot of comments, a lot of really incredible comments from the audience. But we only have, I think, one question so far. So go ahead and ask another question, Kelly. And then I want to share some of these incredible comments from the audience.
Okay. I just want to know, how did you come about writing this book?
I could write a book on how I ended up writing this book. So over the years, as I did speaking and preaching, I told a lot of my life story anyway. And I felt in my heart, my spirit, I was supposed to write it down. And a number of people said to me over the years, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. And to be really honest with you, I was intimidated by the process. I have fair confidence in my oration skills. I know I'm a strong orator. I like to talk. I didn't have the same confidence in my writing ability. So I put it off and I made excuses, and then life got busy, and, you know, I let everything get in the way. And then we moved here to Grand Rapids, Michigan from New York City, which is the publishing capital of the world. And I tried a few times to get a book deal, and I couldn't get a book deal. I worked for CBS that was owned by a company that owned a publisher, and I couldn't get a book deal. So, you know, just kind of put it on the back burner. But when we moved here, very shortly after we moved here, I was sitting at a music school waiting on my daughter to finish her piano lesson. And I was sitting next to one of my husband's colleagues. And I knew who he was, but we didn't know each other. So we were just getting to know one another. And, you know, in many cases, when people know that I'm a Miss America, then they want to know about it. And so he asked me about it, and I was telling him the story. And he goes, wow, you need to write a book. And I'm like, I know. People have been telling me this. And I said, in fact, I'm in disobedience because I believe this is something God has called me to do, and I haven't done it. And then he said the most amazing thing. He said, well, I sit on the board of a publisher. Would you like to meet an editor? And I was like, yeah. And so he introduced me to the woman who would become my executive editor for this book. And she mentored me for about 6 months and helped me. I had several versions of book proposal, and I dusted one off, and she mentored me through the process of updating it and getting in shape to submit it again. And I submitted it to Our Daily Bread, who is my publisher, and they accepted the proposal and offered me a book deal. And I love to tell that story. First of all, I believe God is a redeemer of time. He created it. So it's never too late if we're willing to be obedient. And so I'm so appreciative that 30 years later, he still allowed this opportunity for me to write this down, but also that he will put the right people at the right time in our path if we'll only be open to it. And so when I met Kari, is his name, I thank him in the acknowledgments in the book. When I met him, I was presented a door, and I had a decision. Am I going to walk through this door, or am I going to keep making excuses? So to go full circle about what courageous faith is, it's also about walking through those doors when God presents them. And I didn't have any more confidence in my writing ability, 2-3 years ago when I signed the deal with Our Daily Bread, than I did 30 years ago when I kept putting it off. But my faith had matured in God. And I'm like, God, I can't do this in my own strength, my own ability, but I know that you can do this in me. And so if I can quickly just share a story, because this is not in the book at all, but the writing process was not only cathartic for me in telling stories that are part of my life, but it was spiritually enriching. So the way I wrote this book, and I hope that readers feel this, was every time I sat down to write, I treated it like a devotion. I would pray. I would ask the Holy Spirit to come into the space with me and to show me what to write and how to write it. And I would pray for the readers who were going to ultimately read these words, and pray that they would not only be blessed by my words, but through reading my words would discover God's plan and God's purpose for their life. And so that's how I approached every writing session. And so something that I put off for 30 years because I thought I couldn't do it, thought I wouldn't like it, thought it wasn't possible, became this enriching experience that I couldn't wait to get back to another writing session. And I'd have to squeeze in writing between working and traveling and being a mom and being a wife and preaching and all the other things I was doing. But I couldn't wait to get to that next writing moment, because it was literally a spiritual experience. It was a time with God. And so it's my ultimate prayer that readers, when they read this book, they will feel the power of God in operation in them by reading how God operated in my life.
I love the process. And, I hear your voice. It's beautifully written. It really is. And I just hear your voice when I read it. I really do. And I chuckled in some of the stories, and the chapter of your mother was so touching. Again, I've never felt this way about a book, but I am going to read it again because it was that good.
Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you so much. That blesses me. Thank you.
Yeah. Shane, did you want to share some comments?
Mm-hmm. I also want, sorry. I also want to remind our audience that Debbie has been so kind to sign book plates that will be available. They will be coming our way very soon. So we are very happy to be able to offer signed book plates, signed copies for everyone who orders from Left Bank Books. Let's start with a comment from Darlister. So Darlister says, "Hello, Dr. Debbie Turner Bell. How exciting it is to see the release of your book. Can't wait to read it." Majkin says, "So humbled by this incredible woman. She is beyond beautiful, both inside and out. We can all take a lesson from her book of life. Inspiring, motivating, and full of love and kindness of heart. A true American treasure. Thank you, Debbie, for being such a role model for so many young women."
Oh, thank you. Shane, can I interrupt you for just a second? First of all, I want to go back to Darlister Mitchell. She has known me literally since I was a little girl. Mm-hmm. She's one of my mother's spiritual daughters. So hi, Darlister. How are you? Thank you so much for tuning in. And I talk about in the book surviving on the prayers of my mom and those that were in the Thursday night share group. And she's a part of that group. So she literally has prayed me through to this point. So thank you. And I appreciate Mikan as well. Mikan is she is the head of the Miss America Foundation and is working really hard to keep that program going. And so, Mikan, thank you so much. All right, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask you how, I know that you go back for Miss America pageants. How active are you in the Miss America realm now?
Yeah. Well, not a lot, but as much as I can be. Every once in a while, I'll judge a state pageant. I've judged the Miss America pageant a couple of times over these last 30 years. This year, I will say, is the 100th anniversary of the Miss America program. The very first Miss America pageant, which back in those days was called the Atlantic City Bathing Beauties Contest, was in September of 1921. And so excited the pageant is celebrating 100 years. and I hope to be able to go back for the pageant this year. So the Miss Americas, we're a very close-knit, rare group. A little boy born has a better chance of becoming a Major League Baseball player than a little girl born becoming Miss America. So we're a really exclusive sorority. We love one another, and we try to go to the pageant as many times each year, more so to be around each other. It's like a homecoming for each other, as much as supporting the contestants who are competing for the title. And we kind of we evaluate who we want to be in our sorority. We have nothing to do with who gets chosen, but we kind of want to be on the front end of it.
I know you've been asked this question before. I'm sure you have, and I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
What if your daughter came to you and said, I would like to compete in a pageant?
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell her?
Before I would tell her anything, I myself would kind of evaluate her age and her emotional maturity. I think one of the saving graces for me, I entered my very first pageant at 16, which is quite young, but by that age, I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian. I knew that I was smart and that it didn't matter really what people thought about how I looked, that I had worth beyond what one could see on the outside. So I'd want to make sure that she had reached that point of emotional development, that she didn't get her identity from other people evaluating her. And if I felt confident that she could handle that, then I tell her, go for it and do your very best. If you're going to do it all out, or don't do it at all.
Great advice. I want to read a passage, and if you want to read a passage, feel free. But I'd like what you have on page 213. This is the perseverance.
Okay.
I'll put my glasses on, and this was after you have run and finished 6 marathons,
mm-hmm.
and you end with the marathon, this last chapter, and you said, nothing in my life has come quickly or easily. I have to always remind myself of that fact. It took 7 years to win Miss America. It took 15 years to realize the man of my dreams was already in my life. It took more than a decade to finally anchor the news, and I am still waiting for some other goals and accomplishments. Perseverance in significance requires time, sometimes lots of it. So you've accomplished so much. What else? What other goals do you have in mind?
Oh my goodness, a lot. I jokingly say I'm like a border collie. If I don't have a new challenge, I become destructive. So a lot of things. Most importantly, I've learned by this point in life to really ask God. There's a scripture that says God gives us the desires of our heart. And I believe if it's properly interpreted, what that really means is that God will put in our heart his desires for us, so that the desires we have are in line with his desires and his will for our life. So I've come to a point in my life where I just want to do what God wants me to do, what he created me to do. And I have learned that my dreams are not God-sized. There's another scripture that says, now unto him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above anything I could ask or think. And what God has brought to my life and allowed me to experience has been beyond my wildest imaginations. So while I do have some goals of things that I like, I lay them at the foot of the cross, because I know whatever goals that God has for me are bigger than my little piddling goals. So I'm open to what he has, and I'm always waiting on him to blow my mind, because he has every time.
And that can apply to everyone who is listening, who has goals in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What I like to do is say, make plans, then pray, and wait on the answer you hear.
I love that. Okay, I have one more passage too, if you don't mind me reading it, because you can see I have a lot of things highlighted.
Okay.
This is under purpose, and you say, and this is kind of something nice to end on. Faith is a decision, not a feeling.
Mhm.
We may feel apprehensive, but we don't have to make decisions based on those feelings. We can decide to trust God no matter what the circumstances look like, knowing He will direct us. He promises. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not in your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths.
Mhm.
Proverbs.
Yep. That's Proverbs 34, right? No, Proverbs 3
Yeah,
verses 5.
3.
Yeah, 3, 5, and 6. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you know.
You do know. Yes.
Uh, yeah. I firmly believe, and I say this all the time when I'm speaking or preaching, that faith is not a feeling. And, we get hung up when we think that how we feel has anything to do with faith. Faith is a decision. And I don't believe there's any little faith or big faith. There's a lot of people say, oh, pray God gives me more faith. I think faith is like pregnancy. You can't be a little bit pregnant. You either are or you aren't. The same with faith. Scripture says that if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Well, a mustard seed is the size of a sesame seed on a McDonald's bun. So that's a little tiny. So if we just have faith and then based on that faith, make a decision. God, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this situation, but I know you know. And so I'm going to trust you. It's a decision. And when we just decide, I'm going to trust God no matter what. I love to quote Job. He said, though he may slay me, yet will I trust him. And this is after he had lost everything. He still was willing to trust God, even though God was the one that could be credited with taking everything away from him. I'm still going to trust you. That was a decision that he made. And in our lives, as we face difficulty, and especially in this crazy time, I mean, if you watch the news today, a whole new war is breaking out in Afghanistan. And, then of course we've got the pandemic and natural disasters, the earthquakes and the wildfires, and it's enough to put us under the covers. But I believe it's overwhelming. And so having courageous faith, but faith particularly in this day and age is more important than ever. To not be moved by our emotions, to not be moved by what we can see around us, but to know who God is. And I believe we get to know him through his scriptures. That's the best way to get to know him. And then make a decision. I'm going to trust you. This might look crazy, but I'm going to trust you. You're going to make this work together for my good. And it has been my experience that he does that every time.
Well, I got to tell you, I want to thank you, Debbie, Dr. Debbie Turner-Bell, for joining us. This book is a must read, especially for those of us who really need it this time. As you were saying, there's a lot going on in the world. And these 10 principles are just, it kind of like takes you and kind of hugs you, the book does. So I highly recommend, kind of, if you feel like you've strayed a little bit, this kind of helps you return back to where you need to be.
Amen. Thank you for saying that. And thank you so much, Kelly, for joining me in this. I appreciate this. Kelly is a good friend. We have shared so many laughs together and so much good food together and even run together. We ran the New York City Marathon together. So I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
You've been a good friend.
And again, thank you, Shane, for opening up this space for me to be able to talk about my book and to answer a few questions. Now, don't think I don't recognize, Shane, that Kelly straight up show jacked you and just took right back over the conversation.
We do have some questions in the comments that you might want to go back in and answer afterwards.
I was looking at the wrong time also. I was looking on my computer time and not the time. Go ahead, Shane.
Let's get to, I want to ask two questions. I'm going to combine a couple into one so that we can get some just quick answers out. But Wanda's asking, how can we be notified when the signed books arrive? So if you order from Left Bank Books, we will, if they are for pickup, we will let you know as soon as the book plates have arrived by giving you a call. Or if they are for being mailed out into the world, wherever you are, we will wait until we get the book plates in to be able to send those out. So if you order tonight, we will let you know as soon as book plates have arrived. But Katie is asking, is there going to be an audiobook version since you are such an amazing speaker?
And I'm looking over here at the comments, and I know that Katie Galassi, she's a member of my church and a dear sister friend. And yes, Katie, I already recorded the audiobook and it is available. So if you go to Amazon.com right now, they don't have the book available. The inventory is not there for the hard copy, but you can get the audiobook right now. So it's already out. And I recorded it. So, prepare yourself to hear my deep, low voice for a few hours.
I think that'll be fantastic having an audiobook.
Thank you.
Tanya asks, do you anticipate writing more books?
Yeah, I do. And I say it that way because, again, I'm still a little intimidated by the writing process. But yes, I believe that there's, another book or two in me. I'm already praying and listening for, what is the next one to do. So yes, I don't think I'm one and done. I think there's more to come.
Will it be, can you give us a hint? Will it be similar to something like this, or?
Well, somebody like Maya Angelou, she wrote 3 autobiographies because, she lived that big a life. So I don't know that I'm going to be doing any more memoirs. But, I would love to do perhaps a devotional, maybe use these motivational principles and turn them into devotionals. Might do that. I've got a couple other things. I'm not sure yet, so I don't want to say too much. But it's my hope that whatever I do, it will be, inspiring and instructive and impart tools on how to live life well and to live it more significantly. I'll just say it like that.
All right. Well, I want to thank you both for this incredible conversation. Dr. Debbye Turner-Bell, you've been fantastic. It's wonderful to meet you. And Kelly, I've been watching you for years. Long time viewer, first time meeting. But I want to remind everyone to buy the book from Left Bank Books. I would love to see this book on the St. Louis bestsellers list that happens once a week. I feel like this book deserves a top place on that list. Mm-hmm. So buy now from Left Bank Books so that we can get this book on like the St. Louis list and the New York Times list, like everything. Make this book a bestseller.
Absolutely.
In the name of Jesus. And can I also throw in there, if you go to my website, debbieturnerbell.com, the navigation there for getting the book takes you to Left Bank Books. So you can stay up by going to my website, follow me on all social media. And if you'll be so kind to retweet and share the post to get the word out there, I'd be most grateful. And again, Shane, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shane.
And to the audience watching, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
God bless you.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.